My name is Kyle. I'm the Chief of Staff at Zama, and I am joined today by our three lovely panelists, and in a second I'm going to introduce them. Quick background on me. Basically, I handle all things related to our customer base, helping them go to market as fast as possible. I also nurture, curate our venture ecosystem, hence why we have these guys on stage today. And I work with all the other stakeholders that are relevant to the FHE ecosystem. So if that's you, let's talk. Would love to spend more time getting to know what you guys are doing and how we can collaborate. But now for the men of the hour, I'm going to hand it over to our lovely panel. Wei, why don't we start with you? Give us a quick background on who you are and who you work for and what you do.
Yeah, so hey everyone, great to be here. So I'm a research partner at 1KX. We do early stage crypto investments. Me personally, I focus on infrastructure, especially deep tech infrastructure. So things like FHE, ZK, new blockchain networks, scalability, privacy. I will keep it brief.
Hi everyone, I'm Kyle. I'm a co-founder at Multicoin Capital. We invest in all layers of the stack, deep infra, middleware, consumer, you name it. And yeah, we're fortunate to invest in Zama about a year ago.
Mark Weinstein. I'm a co-founder of Mechanism Capital. We started our fund 4 years ago at the tail end of DeFi summer. Started investing in DeFi projects, and then have since been investing across infrastructure, gaming, and all the other themes in crypto, since crypto seems to be kind of symbiotic with many different industries.
Awesome. Well, today we're going to be focusing on the state of investing in FHE, but I think as a little primer for anyone who is unfamiliar with the subject, it might be worthwhile to cover a little bit around what exactly fully homomorphic encryption is. And as far as I know, Wei is the only cryptographer / PhD on the panel. Maybe you
There are
can
more of you down there, I know.
There's a few in the room. Maybe you can give us just kind of a brief kind of technical definition and how you think about it, both as a cryptographer and as an investor.
Yeah, so FHE is a form of encryption, right? So we all know use encryption every day. Your phone encrypts the traffic, right, between you and the website, and the apps, do encryption between your phone and the server. And FHE does something additional on top of encryption. It allows computation to be done on encrypted data. And this means that there could be a logical data owner. For example, the user, right? You have your personal information on your phone. You could be a blockchain, right? Blockchain have smart contracts, and smart contract may want to have computer information, and to be separated from the logical provider of computation, right? Whereas traditionally, to do a piece of computation, you have to own the data. But now with FHE, the logical owner of the data does not have to do the compute, and the compute provider does not have to own the data. And that's a really, really powerful primitive. It's been talked about in cryptography for over 30 years. And just recently, within the past, actually 14, 15 years ago, we had the first construction, and there has been an explosion of new advances, in academia, in industry, all around this. And we're all here today chatting about it. But yeah, that's briefly what FHE is, in simple words.
Great. Well, Kyle, you and Multicoin co-led the Series A of Zama that we announced earlier this year. And in your investment memo, you talked about the concept of Zama changing the fabric of computing. And I was hoping maybe you could elaborate on your thesis there a little bit.
Yeah, kind of what I meant by that was, if you went back to call it 1994 or so, people were talking about encryption on the internet. There was none, but it was like a thing people talked about. Mark Andreessen famously talked about Congress almost banned encryption, like when they were early days of SSL. But even back then, it was basic kind of what we consider SSL today was considered to be very, very complicated, and people didn't think that was going to be like a normal part of the internet. They thought maybe if it's money movement or credit card information or something, you might have SSL. And fast forward to today, and 100% of websites basically are SSL. Google actually penalizes websites in SEO rankings if you're not SSL'd. And so, over that period, we went from default unencrypted to default encrypted for data in transit. And I just kind of look at it as inevitable that at some point we're going to get to default encrypted data at rest that you can compute over. Just kind of following that trajectory. Doing compute over data is a lot harder technically, but obviously a lot of smart folks are working on it. But we do see that that wind will blow, consistently for the next 20 years.
Very cool. So At Zama, internally, we talk a lot about kind of the customer base that we're going after. Obviously, today we're at EthCC, and I think all of you are familiar with the Ethereum ecosystem. I would assume the majority of you are blockchain developers or founders or enthusiasts. I think there's really no surface area that FHE can't touch. We have use cases in AI and machine learning, in cloud computing, but our real kind of entry beachhead has been in the blockchain. And so what I wanted to ask you, Mark, was a little bit about how you think about the go-to-market strategy for customers leveraging FHE tooling that Zama provides. You've spent a fair amount of your career helping customers, blockchain developers, blockchain entrepreneurs build and go to market. So what kind of unlocks are there as a result of FHE and our open source developer framework?
Yeah, so I think, with a relatively new technology, as far as the potential that FHE has, there's a limited number of use cases in the near term, right? So someone like Phoenix, who are launching an L2 using Zama's library, are limited by the current speed of FHE, which I think the kind of like peak is about 10 transactions per second. So who are going to be the applications that build on top of Phoenix? I believe it's going to be applications that don't really care about having hyperspeed transactions. Something like DPIN is not necessarily going to happen with FHE today. I think things, transactions where there's actually like a ton of value being moved, but slowly, something like peer-to-peer bond markets, which is how bonds are currently traded today. And then another area that I think is interesting is for example, people are always talking about like healthcare data. I invested in a company called Function Health in their seed round. A16Z just followed on. They're not a crypto company, but they are getting a ton of consumer data at the edge. And those users may not be comfortable with sharing their data with whatever kind of AI model that they're building internally. Because using ZK, for example, that information would be decrypted. You have to trust that the model's not capturing that data and storing it separately. So something like training an LLM using healthcare data that end users provide, I think could also be interesting. So it's really like thinking about what use cases can you execute today, and then where are we going in the future. And I think with hardware specific to FHE coming online, I know Zama's doing some research around that as well. FHE-based ASICs, that transactions per second is inevitably going to speed up. And I think that's when we're going to see even more interesting use cases come to market. But for now, I think teams need to focus on what can they do today, and then also start building for the future.
Finally, we got a little bit of rain. I think it's going to cool off.
A little bit.
Thankfully. Yeah, that's great. So I want to take that a step further on the kind of developer experience side of things. That's something we focus on quite a bit. And ultimately, the reason that FHE was not so accessible is that it was so hard to work with. Can you, Wei, as someone who's a little bit more technical on the panel, talk a little bit about how providing basically a simple developer toolkit makes it so easy to implement something like this, whereas 10 years ago it was virtually impossible?
Yeah, definitely. So FHE work over circuits, and if you go to school in computer science, you learn to write a program. You don't write a circuit; you write a piece of code, right? And it turns out that the way to program, the way to best think about how to build an app is to think in terms of like control flow, right? And that it turns out developers don't think in terms of circuits, which is native to FHE. And what Zama has done with FHE VM is to kind of embed a circuit builder inside a smart contract, right? In plain Solidity. And I think this is probably one of the best interfaces that could have anyone could have came up with, right? For blockchains, it allows you to access FHE, but still stay within a language that is familiar to developers, which is Solidity. Yes, control flow, but you're using that to build a circuit. However, I would say though that there's still a lot more to be done. Recently, this is actually a very, very recent result that was discussed, I think, last year during crypto, where you could actually have FHE for what is called Turing machines, right? So there's a circuit type of computation, and there's the programming language type of computation. We have a dynamic control flow, if-else statements, for loops. So it turns out we can actually do FHE for dynamic control flow. And that's something that's even more exciting. You can maybe do entire Solidity inside FHE, right? So today, what we have with FHE VM, I think it's good enough for the set of applications that we want to build today, like poker and like on-chain casinos. But if you really want to put more and more computation inside, like what Kyle have referred to, right, like the entire internet being encrypted, we really had to support programming languages, additional to circuits.
So as investors, we always have to think about the bull case and the bear case. You have to do a little bit of scenario planning and thinking through what might possibly go wrong. And Kyle, I know you do quite a bit of writing and kind of thinking in public around your investment thesis. So I wanted to pose you the question. You invested in Zama. I would assume that you're bullish on Zama. But what are the potential risks for a technology like this not getting widely adopted? Have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, the biggest risks are around performance and timing. There's a huge performance gap between plain text computation and ciphertext computation. That gap has been narrowing. It's narrowed, I don't know, call it 100x in the last 5 years or thereabouts. Still got another, call it 1,000x to go. So long ways to go, but we need to narrow that gap. And a lot of smart people are working on it, and we'll get there through, I think, algorithmic plus software plus FPGA and ASIC, upgrades over time. But we need to get the performance there. And kind of every 10x you gain, you unlock a new set of use cases. Where I think like LLMs is like the highest bar. Running an LLM through FHE is not going to happen anytime soon, or I should say like a GPT-4 level LLM. Small models can run soonish, I think. So like that's what one big item is performance. And the other is timing. And those two things are related. The better the performance gets, the more you can pull up timing of demand. But then I think there's other things that I expect will happen that will like push the market towards FHE. I think at some point regulatory bodies around the world will, like once they know the technology is there, will push businesses towards using it, GDPR being obviously the most famous example of this in the EU, and I expect to see like follow-on regulations of a similar nature that incorporate FHE at some point. Yeah.
So I want to kind of take a step back. We at Zama, we're really a technology vendor at our core. So we see ourselves as kind of the bottom of the stack here, and we've got customers building layer 1 blockchains with that are fully FHE enabled. We've got now with the announcement of our coprocessor, potentially customers starting to build on traditional kind of the Ethereum stack. What are the downstream effects here of potential applications being built with privacy integrated at the core? How do you think about not just us as a technology vendor or that layer 1 blockchains, but how does an ecosystem get built around this? What are kind of the potential use cases longer term that you are particularly excited about?
I think one thing that's valuable about FHE VM is that you have the option as a developer to use FHE in confidential computing with the smart contracts, or you can just use the regular EVM. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. So that allows developers to bring their applications online and kind of use the base application, something like like an Aave lending protocol, and then test out potentially like end users doing something like a flash loan confidentially, right? And I think that's actually super valuable. Or an order book exchange coming online and having those transactions run through FHE EVM rather than just the standard EVM could also be another use case. So I think that like that flexibility between the two is extremely valuable for application developers as you guys are thinking about this toolkit, at least in the Web3 space.
If you may add something. So for example, if you want to make order book, right, you actually need if-else statements and like finding the exact order. It turns out that's like really non-trivial in a circuit, and what requires kind of like this dynamic programs, right? So that's an example where it's like
maybe
not
where we're going,
or something,
but not something just yet.
So our master plan, perhaps some of you had read the master plan that we published online, and if any of you picked up the newspaper that we published, we've got a link to it there if you're curious about reading the master plan for Zama from our CEO. But we talk about our long-term goal of developing what we call HTTP-Z, which is kind of the logical successor to HTTPS. So we want to be the kind of security encryption layer, end-to-end, even at rest, for the internet writ large. Which is a big vision, and it's a long-term vision. We're thinking, 5-10 years out here. How do you think about that being the new kind of paradigm for the internet, both in Web 2 and Web 3? have you given it any thought? Is that something that,
Yeah, I think I think my comment here, or what I think this computational compute as a space will evolve, is that there's really two categories here, and it depends on who the data owner is. Okay, and there's really two cases. One is if the individual still owns the data. These are data that you want to hold, and maybe you want to outsource the data to do a computation, right? To like your DNA data, your data that's on your phone, like your pictures, right? And that's the first category. And the second category is it's actually a blockchain holding a secret, right? Where you have a smart contract holding a secret that no one else knows, that holds information about the market, for example, like a Uniswap pool. And I think there's a fundamental difference between these two use cases. And I think the first category is very Web 2-like. This is the first thing that people have talked about ever since FHE was invented, right? Outsourcing of computation. I think compute is a lot more expensive there because the things that we want to compute is usually things like, AI inference, processing of a large quantity of data. If you look at the second category, when we're talking about smart contracts holding a piece of data that no one else knows, smart contracts have been designed to be super lightweight, right? Ethereum has 30 million gas limits per block per 12 seconds. And that is the best environment for us to experiment in, right? Environments where you have a shared secret that everybody can access. And I think when you're talking about how FHE is going to transform how we interact with the Internet of Value, I think the second category here, where smart contracts are holding secrets, is the key category that will grow first. And then the category where we're using FHE to process personal data. And it will happen. However, I do think, like LM AI, like we have alluded to, they're a lot more compute intensive. And surely, it will happen at some point, but at a slower pace.
So I want to close out before a few questions. We've got a captive audience, and I would imagine there's a couple questions in the room. We wouldn't be in VC if we weren't making bold predictions about the future. I'm curious if any of you guys have any particular predictions around FHE, the state of FHE in 3, 5, 10 years down the line.
I think there will be a time and a place in which at the annual Amazon, Google, Microsoft cloud keynotes that the CTOs are on stage promoting FHE. And I think they'll want to when the tech is ready because it allows them to sell more compute cycles. And at the end of the day, they're in the business of selling compute. So I think that'll be like, the huge turning point moment. Again, I don't think that's particularly near. We're going to need a lot of custom ASICs, I think, before that happens. But that's going to be like a huge moment when the cloud providers are actively promoting it.
I'm interested in basically verifiable confidential compute. So I know that's something that you guys are also doing research on, and maybe that is in some kind of combination with ZKPs and FHE. But I think that confidentiality in and of itself is important, but also making sure that whatever compute you're running is providing the correct answer in a way that you can be proven. It's an important feature of blockchains. It's why we're in this industry. So I think those two combined is something that I'm looking forward to in the future.
I think there's going to be improvements on performance, which will lead to more and more applications being developed on things like FHE, ZK, MPC, or even more fancy cryptographic primitives. And we have seen a lot of improvements all across the stack, right? Both academic constructions to engineering to hardware. I think this is going to continue in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think more and more computes will be going into these, FHE, ZK. And to what extent, like the share of percentage of computation will be in there is yet to be seen. But for sure, it will be larger than what it is today.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Everyone give them a round of applause. All right. Anybody have any questions? Don't be shy. I'll bring you the mic. We've got time for a few.
Yes, hi. So basically, I wanted to ask about the use case of order books compatible with FHE. So basically, how you suggest running high-frequency trading using FHE without hardware?
so I'm probably not the best to answer this. You should ask the Zama engineers, and they have 40 PhDs here. But I think there's multiple levels, right? You for sure need faster FHE, right? But there's tricks to make that. So if you think about querying the application and not changing the code and directly putting FHE, it's probably not going to work at first, right? It has to be a specialized way to build these functionalities. And I think if you look at how Uniswap is built, right? They wanted to replicate a order book on chain, but that was really inefficient. So therefore, they invented this thing called AMMs, right? And so I think the similar things will happen in FHE, where you have similar functionalities that's similar to order book, and then we expand out from there. In particular for order books, we need FHE for VMs, not FHE VM, but like FHE for VMs.
Any other questions?
Thank you for the panel, Alexandra. So we are building Deepin, and I wanted to bring it a little bit based out of Germany. And thank you for discussion about all these cool features in the next internet. However, when we digitize our world, there are a lot of things outside, right? And can you please tell me, all of you, how you look at this? Like, how do we interconnect the real devices, right? Like buses, cars, everything that is around us, because all of what we're talking about, it's expensive computations somewhere in the back end. Like, can you share your strategy on how do you plan on including this, and what's the best way to do this in the future?
I'm not. It's hard to answer your question because I think the use cases are use case dependent. But like, I'll look at Hive Mapper is probably the instructive example here. And like in Hive Mapper, there's like a real data sensitivity issue because people are driving around with their cars, they're taking photos, they're getting people's faces, license plates, etc. Their solution to dealing with this problem, though, is not require FHE. It's they actually, well, I think right now they send it to their Amazon cloud and they basically blur it all on Amazon. But they're actually trying to push that to the edge so that when the dash cam takes the photos, it will do all of the local machine learning and blur it before it sends it up. So I generally think for that kind of a thing, you want to push to the edge. FHE is a way to get privacy, but there's other ways to get privacy, and it's just going to be very use case dependent.
Hi, I'm Nigel from Zama. So okay, Zama is kind of the current cool kid on the block, maybe. But you guys as investors see the new cool kids on the block. So what kind of new tech have you looked at in the last year that you think is rather cool?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things. And I think one thing like I'm personally interested in is things that provide blockchain-like functionalities, like trust minimization and decentralization, that is not a blockchain that require consensus. So my placeholder name for it is called not blockchains, right? And I think, yeah, there's a new category of protocols that are kind of blurring the lines of like, do you need consensus, right? And can you provide properties that Web3 needs without a blockchain? And some other things, for example, coding theory. I think the way DA uses coding theory, and I think there's a lot of other ways coding theory can come in to speed up consensus networks and how data is shared, how data is stored, persisted, so on and so forth. And for example, hardware, hardware acceleration. It's clear that GPUs is being customized for AI, and we need cryptographic accelerators. That's just the three examples.
I can't speak to the underlying technology, but I think that, if you look back 20 years ago, I believe, the idea that FHE was possible was, most even cryptographers believed it to be impossible. And so as an investor, I'm often looking at areas where it may seem kind of, dumb or low IQ or, the smarter people in the room are saying that it's absolutely not possible. One of those areas, there's a lot of overlap of this kind of like Web3 AI narrative. And I think there's a lot of convergence on verifiable inference because that seems to be the thing that people can do today. And there's often folks that are saying that decentralized training is just impossible, defies the laws of physics, can't work if you understand the way that models are trained and the way these compute clusters are set up. With NVIDIA tech, there's a thing called an InfiniBand that connects compute clusters. And I actually think that we're starting to see some new research, which some of it I'm not a PhD, I don't fully understand, that's showing that this is actually possible. Federated learning on decentralized networks. is something that can happen. It may be a far way out. We may need different algorithms. We may need different hardware. But that's something that I'm looking into because it's currently perceived to be impossible.
I'd like to add, like, sometimes tech is not interesting in of itself. It has to be something that like creates value and accrues that value, right, for us VCs. And what we usually look at is things that are either 0 to 1 or a 10x improvements. Something like 1.5, 2x improvement is it's not enough for like to disrupt something, right? And yeah, it's like they're hard to find, but I think there's more to come.
Any other questions, final thoughts? Question over there. One last question here.
Hi. So imagine I have a smart contract and I don't choose any FHE. So it will cost some gas for execution and the size of the contract will have a size. But then if I add some FHE inside the smart contract, will the execution cost, gas cost will increase and will the size of the contract increase or not?
Short answer is it will. You should probably ask the Zama engineers the exact numbers. But really, you're just emitting events. It is like getting into the details.
Jason is shaking his head over there saying no, so maybe have a one-on-one conversation with him. All right, well, thanks again to our panelists. I want to say, just in kind of closing remarks here, we call this the state of FHE, and I think that's really a testament to where we think the technology is. We started commercializing just at the beginning of this year. We've already signed 10 customers, and more are coming on the way. We think there's a lot of traction here, a lot of excitement around FHE, and as a result, we have this, amazing venue here just outside of EthCC, and we're spending a lot of time with you guys, trying to learn what you guys are interested in building. So thanks a ton for being here. A final announcement is around, the namesake, the state of FHE. FHE.org is putting together a comprehensive report. It'll be annual to start, and we are very proud to be collaborators and contributors on the report. So if you guys are interested in that, let us know. If you want to contribute, if you want to share your insights, your data, we'd love to have it. We want this to be as well-rounded and comprehensive as possible, and so it takes a village, especially in these early days. So one last round of applause. Thank you so much to our panelists.
Thanks for the questions.